I'm Connie Baxter Marlow, and I'd like to welcome you to Rhythms of Creation, the Baxter Legacy, a photography exhibit of images and ideas by my father, Jack Baxter, myself, and my daughter, Allie Baxter Marlow. Well, I first had the idea for this show a couple of years ago when I was visiting with my parents, and it became apparent that they were aging. And my father's been a politician and a businessman all his life and hasn't been acknowledged for his photography, which he has been pursuing since he was a young boy. So I thought, how can I honor my parents? And I came up with this idea. I realized that my daughter Allie had been in China photographing indigenous peoples in China, and that I'd been living with indigenous people for the last 10 years, and that my dad, in fact, had been traveling around the world for many years photographing indigenous peoples. So I thought, wow, we have a thread that would pull us together in an exhibit. And so I called Bowdoin College, and where my father had graduated from, and they were very excited about having the Baxter family exhibited there. Last year, it was exhibited at Bowdoin College for the summer under the title of 3 Generations, Impressions of Indigenous Peoples of the World. And Ann Zill got wind of this show, and since both she and Neil Rold, who's on the board of UNE, and Ann being the gallery director at the University of New England, both of those people are very forward-thinking people, and they said, why don't we bring that show to the University of New England, and let's bring in the Baxter legacy, because this being Portland, Maine, and this being where the Baxters really had an impact and where they lived, let's tie the ancestors into this exhibit. And then Wes LaFountain, the curator, brought in the concept of rhythms of creation, because the Baxters, my ancestors, the way they lived and the way they used their beliefs and their ideals in their political life actually reflected and embodied and put into practice the rhythms of creation. And so he felt that that would give a real broad scope to the show. So that's how these people brought their piece to the puzzle and created an exhibit that ended up really evolving into a piece that I became very excited about. Putting this show together, I really came to understand my ancestors and their works, and I saw the depth and the breadth of these men that I wasn't aware of in my being raised as a member of the Baxter family. It really had been downplayed who these men were. And so I grew up in Maine and still had not a real sense of these men. And with the research that I put into for this show, I came to understand that their heartfelt, broad, expansive thinking. And what I discovered by bringing them together with the native peoples that I've been living with for the last 10 years, and in Mexico and the United States, that there were great similarities between the native peoples and their thinking and way of life and my ancestors, these great men who had impacted the state of Maine to such a degree through their actions, when they acted according to the dictates of their hearts. They impacted Maine in such a way that it's etched in the memories of the Maine people, and I discovered perhaps what qualities have led to that. Well, an interesting thing about this show is the intergenerational aspects to it, because here we have 5 generations of people, and we have a distinct heritage that was set in place by my ancestors, James Finney Baxter and Percival Proctor Baxter. James Finney Baxter was mayor of Portland 6 times and the father of the Portland Park system, and he fought for many, many incredible things in his career. The women and anti-vivisection for the animals, and for the parks and for the people, so that the people had places to recreate in Portland. And my uncle, Percival Proctor Baxter, was governor of Maine, and he bought 200,000 acres and Mount Katahdin, the sacred mountain of the native peoples and the sacred mountain of all of us, and gave it to the state. So there was an amazing sense of philanthropy and serving the public and serving the people. My dad, Jack Baxter, was also in the legislature in Maine. I was raised in Pittsfield, Maine, and he was on the governor's executive council and kind of in line for governorship if he wanted it. And also he participated tremendously in our little town of Pittsfield. And so I received a sense of these ideals that have come down through the generations, these ideals of service to humanity. And in my life, it sort of sent me out into the world looking for these attributes. And where I found them was in Native American thought. And the Native Americans became a big part of my life.
Well, let's see. I was born and brought up in Brunswick in the 20s, when Brunswick was a small, sleepy college town. We had an iceman. Our milk was delivered by Mr. Coben with a horse and wagon, and the trolley ran right by our door, which it no longer does. Went to Bowdoin. Interestingly enough, my grandfather, my father, myself, and my son all lived in the same dormitory room in Portland, in Bowdoin, and there was a member of our family on the board at Bowdoin from the time it was founded in 1790. From college, I went in the Army, left the Army in 1945 as a second lieutenant in the Quartermaster Corps. I had intended to go to business school, but my mother had died, and my father needed me at home. So I came back to Maine and became vice president in charge of manufacturing for our old line family canning and freezing company. After being in Brunswick with my father for a while, I moved to Pittsfield in about 1950, because that way I could be near the plants that I was supervising. While I was in Pittsfield, I ran for the legislature, and because Pittsfield was probably 95% Republican, I managed to get elected because I was a Republican. And in the legislature, I served 4 years in the House of Representatives, majority leader for 2 years. And then I served as vice chairman of the Executive Council of the state, which, as you may know, is no longer around, having been legislated out of existence by the Democrats. James Finney, who everybody is familiar with as the many times mayor of Portland and the conceptualist of Baxter Boulevard, was my great-grandfather. I was born in 1920 and he died in 1921, so we weren't too close, needless to say, but there is a family portrait, four-generation portrait of him and my grandfather and my father and myself, taken when I was probably just a few months old. James Finney was his son, Percival was his son by his second wife. So he is my great uncle, or really my half great uncle. And that's how I'm related to them. I started as a photographer in the box brownie era of the 20s. And my equipment upgraded from there. I kept many albums. I took pictures of my friends and my dog and my parents and so forth. And that has continued continuously up to the present time, except that during my time in the Army I did very little photography, but I have had a dark room ever since I was about 12, and every house that I've lived in or built has had a dark room. First a black and white dark room, and now both black and white in color. I never studied photography formally. I was self-taught. I subscribed to many magazines. I went to every photographic exhibit that I could go to. Particularly, I would go to New York and make the rounds of the galleries and the museums. And when I looked at all these pictures, I would say, would I print that, and would I exhibit that? And my answers, incidentally, were usually no. And I think that's, I hope, characteristic of my photography, in that I am very severe with myself as to what's good and what's not good. Lately, I have taken some workshops, some in people photography and some in figure photography. As you know, figure photography is a euphemism for a photograph of the nude, and I have done quite a bit of that. My photography is my basic avocation. I count on it. I see pictures everywhere. I don't always take them, but I see them, and it's very much a part of my life on a continuing basis, whether I'm actually photographing or thinking about photographing. I was always, in photographing people of the world, I have always been interested in people photography. I'm not a good landscape photographer. I'm not a good still life photographer. And I have not done any portrait work. But I was always interested in people, and so when I started to travel to many, many esoteric places, I was much impressed with the difference of the people I saw and the cultures that they lived in from my own, and in general the American culture, so it was natural to start to photograph them. And I found that I was very successful at that, and so that continued my interest in that particular field, and I've been doing that ever since in many, many countries in the world. The pictures that I take last only a few seconds, and then they're gone. So I would not have time to focus and determine exposure and so forth. Beyond that, I do use 35 millimeter. I do use generally long lens, 100 to 300 millimeter, so that the subjects that I photograph are not aware that I'm photographing them, and therefore they do not pose. I do not like posed photographs. I like people acting naturally within their natural environment. Again, these are examples of how I photograph. In the case of the boy with the dog, I saw that was taken in China, and I saw that picture developing, and in this case I did wait for a moment for it to come together. The dog took his position, looked at the boy, and I shot. Within an instant it was gone. The man on the bicycle I took in Dublin, Ireland, many, many years ago, as you'll notice because it's black and white. And again, I saw him approaching. I saw the background. I fired, and obviously within an instant it was gone because he was pushing his bicycle. Madonna and child I took in India. And again, this is an example of my intuitive shooting. because I don't remember taking that picture. It happened so fast, and I took it so quickly, and it was gone so quickly that I don't even remember taking it. We have to keep in mind that when I go to a foreign country such as India, I probably shoot upwards of 700 shots. And I cull those down to maybe 10 or a dozen that I'm willing to have, I'm willing to print and willing to exhibit. And there's probably another 20 or 25 that I keep for maybe slideshows or something like that, or just for my own albums. Not only do I do the work of the artist, but I am continually seeing art everywhere I go. I see landscapes. Again, I don't take them, but I see them and enjoy them. I see people, I watch people carefully, and think, oh, I would like to photograph him or her, as the case may be. And so it's just very much a part of my life, and I would miss it and feel my life was really not complete if I didn't have that outlook and that feeling for artistic expression. For me, the great joy of traveling is to record the lives of people living naturally and unposed within their culture, not as touristy snapshots, but with a certain amount of compositional integrity. To do this requires an intense interest and focus on the people around me and split-second timing. There must be a quick sense that there is a picture here or a picture developing here. I hope you will feel the tension of the fleeting moment in many of these photographs. Also, I hope you will see in them not just pretty pictures, but feel the mystery of how these different people in their different cultures lived before and after the fleeting moment that I have captured for you. Manuel Alvarez Bravo, the leading photographer in Mexico, has said that the invisible is always contained in the art which creates it. And I hope you will search for the invisible in what you see here. So that, I think, tries to explain what I'm trying to do with my art. The exhibit was conceived and brought about by my daughter Connie, who is a fine conceptualist and a fine executive, and Allie, my granddaughter, has done some very good work in her trip to China. And my daughter Connie started out as a formal photographer with training in a photography school in LA, and went on to take the pictures of Mount Katahdin that are now in her book, both landscapes and still lifes, and did a beautiful job at that. And since then she has become a documentary photographer, photographing peoples, indigenous peoples in whom she's interested, and putting together albums of these people.
I started studying photography in the 60s when I was a student at Berkeley. I studied with a large landscape photographer and did a lot of work with Ansel Adams and his workshops in Yosemite, and became inspired then to do a book on Mount Katahdin. And the original edition of my book was to share the thoughts and visions of my uncle and his intent on giving why he gave Katahdin to the people of Maine. I was a landscape photographer for a long time, and then when it became time for me to settle down and become a mother, I pretty much hung up my cameras, and actually I gave them to my husband. They were kind of my dowry into our marriage, because my husband is a commercial photographer, and I was shooting with a Hasselblad, and the Hasselblad was a perfect tool for him. So I went on into being a mom and actually traded my Hasselblad for a point and shoot and a movie camera. As a mother, I found myself taking pictures of every move my kids made and recording every moment of their lives. And when it came time for me to journey out into the world and sort of as this seeker person that I became, as a result of being born to this Baxter family who gave everything away and who lived according to different principles, as I went out and found the native peoples and started living with the native peoples, I started just shooting them, just the way I had shot my kids. So every move the Indians made, I shot it with my point and shoot camera. And it was it's really a continuation of that thread that ended up in this exhibit, because I really had no intention of exhibiting the photographs here. They were really taken as a family portrait, family archival situation to document my time with these people. The photographs in this show really encompass both my styles of photography, both these times in my life. When I was a landscape photographer, my pictures of Mount Katahdin, and then my pictures of these people that I lived with. And I'm presenting the pictures of the native peoples in family albums to emphasize that we're all one family and that I was a member of their family, that I didn't go in there to take pictures of these people. It just was a natural outpouring of my connection with them. Many of the pictures in the exhibit of the native peoples were taken when I was traveling and living with the native peoples with my children, but they were also taken on a journey that I took with two men. It was called the Journey for Peace and Healing in the Americas. And we traveled throughout the United States and Mexico, gathering prayers for peace and healing in the Americas, and then we were honoring indigenous cultures. And we had these buttons, these "We Are Family" buttons that we translated into Spanish that we gave away throughout our journey down through Mexico. And I have those buttons available at the exhibit, because this whole concept of family to me is such an important one, that our family extends beyond the bloodlines and encompasses everyone we come in contact with. It's really interesting for me that this exhibit is a family exhibit and encompasses 5 generations of our family, and is also mirroring my concepts of the human family and us all coming together as equals, the native people and the white people, not as one helping the other, but as friends, as family. It's really exciting to me that my daughter picked up a camera and took such magical pictures over in China. You know, it's really interesting to me that this coming down through the family this way, and that she had never studied it, never was really interested in photography. We just gave her a point and shoot. Her grandfather gave her a point and shoot camera to take with her on her trip, and she came home with these magical pictures. And it just seems that she got it from just being around it all the time, and with her father a photographer and me a photographer. The Katahdin pictures I took originally 30 years ago for a book on Katahdin entitled Greatest Mountain, Katahdin's Wilderness. And the original intent of that book was to share my Uncle Percy's vision and intent with creating Baxter Park and setting aside Katahdin, with the hopes that as people heard his intent, they would open their hearts and minds and understand why this area had been set aside. And now the book has been published a second time, 30 years later, and the new edition, I'm again presenting the ideas of my uncle, but also I'm bringing in the Native American connection to the sacred mountain of Katahdin, and in an effort, again, to share information with people so that perhaps we can open our hearts and minds to a bigger look at reality, that perhaps Mount Katahdin is a sacred place, that it has an energy, it has a role to play in our lives as a conscious aspect of creation. This is a whole new way of thinking for our minds, and I'm hoping that when we open to it, we may shift some things. My contact with the native peoples really came about as an answer to many questions that I have had coming from this heritage of people who really appear to live according to a different set of parameters for their lives. And I found such similarities amongst the native peoples that I really felt that in order to educate my children properly, I had to take them and expose them to native thinking. So I ended up taking them to Mexico, into the jungles of Mexico with the Mayan peoples and with the Huichol people and the Hopi people here in the United States. And all of this has come out of those experiences. The courage and vision of my ancestors, of Percy Baxter and James Finney Baxter, have impacted my life all my life. And it's really, my uncle lowering the State House flag to half-mast when his dog died just gave me such amazing courage to walk to the beat of my own drum, regardless of the expectations of the culture, and actually regardless of the laws of the culture, because he actually, you know, walked according to the dictates of his heart to honor his dog. And many people found that it was offensive to their perceptions of how things should be.
I was 18 when I went to China. I had always wanted to go to China, so after I graduated from high school, I spent 3 months traveling across China, a month in Tibet, and then 2.5 months in Nepal. How I happened to photograph this particular group of Uyghur people was that I took an expedition into a remote region of China on the bottom of the Taklamakan Desert, where I met up with an explorer photographer friend of my parents. We traveled about 8 hours by car into this small village where the people were really kind and warm and were not camera shy at all. They really had never seen a Western person before, and so they were really easy to photograph. Then after we spent a few days in that village, we hiked about a day with a team of mules and a couple of guides from the village into a very small village where I also took many pictures of the people there. It was a really amazing experience just to be in a place and think that nobody else, I mean, that you know, anybody in your country had ever been there before. I mean, just local people, but they just have a really different perspective on things. And I found it really interesting just communicating with the local people, because I came in there and I wore pants and I had on a short sleeve shirt and I have blonde hair, and they really didn't know what to make of me being a woman, because women wear dresses and they're almost completely covered and they always wear something on their head. So they were really uncomfortable with me at first. They really didn't know what to make of me. After a while of being with them, I figured out that I was making them uncomfortable, so I changed into a skirt, put on a long sleeve shirt, and tied a bandana around my hair. And after that, they were really a lot warmer, much more friendly, and the women would invite me into the kitchen and teach me how to cook, and the little girls would show me how to wash my clothes, and they were just really amazing people. They were so accepting and welcoming. How it happened that I ended up taking pictures while I was in China was I didn't go there with the intention of taking a lot of photographs, but when I got there I found myself sitting around and I couldn't really communicate with the people, so I would just watch them and watch what they were doing, and I found myself just thinking, wow, that would make a really beautiful photograph. So I just started taking pictures of the things that I thought would be a good photograph. I enjoy shooting both people and landscapes, but my favorite pictures are of the people, because for me it's more about just a picture. It's a whole experience, and it's about the people that I've spent time with, and to me those are my favorite pictures. But I love the pictures of the landscapes because it reminds me of where I've been. I spent 2 months traveling through Tibet, and while I was there, I spent most of that time hitchhiking around and traveling from monastery to monastery and spending time with the local people and the monks. Most of my pictures are of children because the children are the ones who really spent a lot of time with me. They would sit with me all day and just watch me or just draw with me, and the adults were a little more reserved. I took pictures of them, but they would kind of stay back at a distance, so the children were around me all the time, and which is why I took more pictures of them than the adults. The picture of all the children in the village was taken because everybody in the village was so interested in my camera, and everybody wanted to be in my pictures. And anytime I ever tried to take a picture of 1 or 2 people, all the kids would kind of jump in the picture and try to be a part of it. So what I did is I lined up every kid that I could find in the village and just took a picture of them. The picture of the boy with the wheel, I saw this boy rolling a wheel down the street, through the main street of town, and I squatted down and had my camera, and I just thought he was the most adorable little boy, and I was going to take a picture of him just kind of rolling his wheel. But as I was about to take the picture, he stopped, kind of put his arms on top of the wheel, just looked at me, just in time for me to take the picture, and then he just kind of rolled on by. The picture of the monk in the doorway, I was in a monastery in Tibet, and I saw this beautiful doorway, and I really wanted to take a picture of it. So I got my camera, I was focusing, and then this monk kind of came out. He went out, watered a plant, and then as he was walking back in, I just took the picture while he turned around and looked at me. I've never been schooled in either photography or art, so I really didn't go to China with the intention of taking pictures. But when I got there and I looked through my camera, I could just see something that looked like a beautiful picture, and it just felt really natural for me to be taking pictures. That could come from the fact that I was raised with 3 photographers. My mother, grandfather, and father all take pictures. I intend to keep traveling and taking pictures while I travel because I found through my experiences in China that it's a really great way to relate and connect with the people. I would love to return to China. I had a great experience there, and I really made some connections with the people. When I was there, they offered me jobs teaching English in the schools there, so I would love to go back and see them. Tibet also. Tibet was a really beautiful place, and I feel that it's changing so quickly that I would love to go back and to experience their culture some more. My immediate plans are, I'm planning on going back to school and studying anthropology and psychology. And after that, hopefully next summer, I would love to go to Egypt. I'm really happy about the photography exhibit that's touring Maine. It took a little bit getting used to because I really didn't take my pictures with any intention of showing them, but I think it's turned out really well, and it's a beautiful show.
We had 3 events in conjunction with the show. The first one was the Baxter Vision in a historical perspective, with 3 significant Maine historians speaking on the life and works of Percival Proctor Baxter and James Finney Baxter. They were Herb Adams, Earl Shuttleworth, and Neil Rold. And the second event was called Carrying the Baxter Legacy into the Future, a Case for Expanded Thinking. In this event, I spoke and brought all these elements together, the elements of my ancestors, the native peoples, Katahdin, and also Sarah Pletz did an original dance theater interpretation on the life and works of Percival Baxter. And Laura Campbell sang an original song on the vision of Percival Baxter. And also a Native American elder spoke and shared Native thinking. So that was a wonderful evening. The third event was the Wabanaki Indians came together with the people of Maine. We all came together and honored Mount Katahdin in the Native way. And it was a really lovely sharing of Native thinking in the Native way and Native connection to Katahdin and honoring of Katahdin. It was really exciting to have this show exhibited at the University of New England, mainly because the University of New England at the Westbrook campus sits right beside the cemetery where James Finney Baxter and Percival Baxter are buried. Actually, Percival Baxter's ashes are on Katahdin, but there's a monument there to the Baxter family, very close by this gallery. And also, it's very close to Baxter Woods that my family donated to the city of Portland. And also, the streets around here are all named for my great-great-grandfather and his sons. So it just seems very appropriate. And also, my mother graduated from Westbrook Junior College in 1940. So it really brought this thing together in a physical way and symbolic way. Well, the timing of this exhibit is really interesting because from my experience and my understanding of the human condition and where we're headed, I sense that we're starting to open our hearts. And what this is about, this show, and my ancestors and the native peoples and my life and this whole thing is really about opening the heart and living according to the dictates of the heart. So perhaps it's something that's happening to open our hearts and minds to a broader reality and giving us courage to go there, because these men went there, these ancestors of mine, and it might just bring a new understanding that we can bring to our lives. From here, the show is going to go to Mexico, to Chiapas, Mexico, where a lot of the pictures were taken of families that I've been living with, native peoples that I've been living with. And it's also the center of the Mayan Revolution, so that should be pretty exciting to bring those ideas to Chiapas. And then after that, in 2001, the fall of 2001, it's going to open at the Hudson Museum, which is an anthropological museum. And it'll take on more the indigenous people aspect of it. I've been living with Native Americans for the past 10 years throughout the West and Mexico, and coming home to Maine, I've discovered the native peoples in Maine, and that those people have been living, have kept alive after 500 years of contact and a real assimilation process into the white world. They have kept alive native thought and native ways, and we've become good friends, and it's been an exciting process, and this show has been a platform for bringing us all together in a good way.